When I graduated college and landed my first teaching job, I felt like I was finally starting to stand on my own 2 feet. Sure, it wasn't a high-paying job, but I was doing what I loved working with kids. As a 25-year-old, I was proud of myself. I had worked hard to get here, and the sense of accomplishment was worth every sleepless night. But, like many other young adults, I still had to make sacrifices. Money was tight. That's when I moved back in with my parents. I wasn't thrilled about it, but it seemed like the most practical option. They charged me rent, nothing exorbitant, and I covered my own groceries. I was chipping in with household chores, like mowing the lawn and helping with repairs. The setup wasn't ideal, but it was temporary. My plan was simple: stay with them for a couple of years, save some money, and then find a place of my own. Then, everything started to unravel. My older sister Amanda, 32, had been living on her own for a while at least. That's what I thought. Amanda had always been the golden child in our family. I'm not talking about the typical older sibling dynamic. This was a whole different level. No matter how irresponsible or lazy she was, my parents never seemed to see it. They thought everything she did was excusable. Dropped out of college twice. No problem. Had no job for months at a time. It's just a phase. They always bailed her out. While I was busting my butt at a diner, working long shifts just to pay for tuition and groceries, Amanda was living in a haze of financial irresponsibility. They covered her rent, repaired her car, and even paid her tickets. As for me, I took out loans to cover tuition, worked part-time jobs, and was constantly told to be grateful for the little I had. When Amanda showed up at my parents' house unexpectedly one afternoon, I had no idea what was about to hit me. "I'm pregnant," she casually said. And just like that, the world seemed to shift under my feet. I wasn't here to judge anyone's life choices, but this was Amanda we were talking about, irresponsible, always running to our parents for help when life got difficult. She was pregnant by a guy she'd been seeing for just a couple of months, and he, predictably, disappeared as soon as he found out. You'd think this would be a wake-up call for Amanda, a moment where she'd realize she needed to change, to get her life together. But no, not Amanda. She ran straight to mom and dad, and the gears of their fix-it machine started turning. Within a week, they were already renovating the basement to convert it into a little apartment for Amanda. They even put in a kitchenette. I didn't ask where the money was coming from, but one night, I overheard mom casually mention they were dipping into their retirement savings to fund the renovation. At first, I tried to stay out of it. After all, it wasn't my business what they chose to do for Amanda, even if it felt like they were throwing money at her problems, but I could already see the writing on the wall. My parents didn't just do things for Amanda, they expected everyone around her to get involved. They wanted everyone to pick up the pieces of her mistakes, and soon, I would realize that I was being roped into her chaos whether I liked it or not. 2 months after Amanda moved back in, the subtle hints began. Mom started suggesting I spend more time with her. "You know, Amanda really needs support right now," she'd say, giving me that look. "You know, the kind that makes you feel guilty for simply existing?" Then came the guilt trips. "You know, Amanda doesn't have anyone else to lean on right now. It must be so hard for her. Pregnant and alone." It started to build, a slow pressure that settled into my chest. I was working full-time, barely managing my own responsibilities, and now they wanted me to play nanny to Amanda's newborn. My frustration grew, but I tried to keep my cool. The real problem, however, wasn't Amanda. It wasn't even the house I was living in, or the guilt trips my parents kept laying on me. The real issue was that my parents were starting to treat me as if my time, my energy, my life was secondary to Amanda's. It wasn't just a conversation here or there, it was a constant feeling of being pushed to the side. One evening, while I was getting dinner ready, I overheard a conversation that would be the last straw. "She's going to need a lot of help once the baby comes," Mom said to Dad, her voice a little too cheery. I froze, the sounds of the conversation washing over me like a cold wave. Dad, as usual, was playing along. "Well, we'll all pitch in," he said, but his voice held a certain finality to it. Mom turned to him and said, "You, me, and Abby." My name hung in the air like a dirty secret. Abby, me, my name, suddenly tied to a plan I hadn't agreed to. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my stomach sinking. I tried to process what they were saying, but it didn't make sense. They were planning to involve me in the chaos that was Amanda's life. They hadn't even asked me, they just assumed. That's when the panic set in. What were they going to ask me to do? What were they planning? How was I going to get out of this? At dinner that night, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was speaking in overly casual tones, but it was clear they were all waiting for the right moment to spring their plan on me. I was the one who didn't know the secret. I felt like I was watching a scene from a movie, but the script was one that made me feel like I had no control. It started out innocently enough. Mom, as always, had that overly sweet tone when she started. We've been thinking, with Amanda moving back home, she's going to need some help. I set my fork down, unsure of what to expect, but knowing it wasn't going to be good. Help with what exactly, I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Help with the baby, Dad said, his voice too cheerful. Amanda's going to need a lot of help, and we thought it made sense for you to help out. You're already living here, and you're great with kids. You're a teacher, after all. My eyes widened. Was he seriously asking me to take care of Amanda's child for free? Wait, let me get this straight. I said, leaning back in my chair. You want me to come home from teaching all day and take care of Amanda's baby? Mom sighed, like I was being difficult. It's not like that. Abby, she said, her voice overly patient, we'll all pitch in. It's family. Family helps each other out. Family, I repeated. I already pay rent. I buy my own groceries. I help out with chores around here. How is that not enough? Dad's face darkened. We're all in this together, he said, eyes narrowed. I could feel my pulse quickening. Was this really happening? Was I being gaslighted into believing this was some sort of responsibility that was mine? I tried to stay calm, but the words started coming faster. It's not my responsibility to fix Amanda's mistakes. She's 32, not a child. Mom's voice rose, a defensive edge creeping into her words. Abby, she's going through so much right now. The least you can do is help her out. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm done, I said, standing up from the table. You want to help Amanda, fine, but leave me out of it. I stormed upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I was done being their backup plan, their unpaid nanny. This wasn't just about babysitting. This was about control. They wanted to keep me under their roof so they could manipulate me into doing whatever they needed. And I had had enough. The days after that argument felt suffocating. Mom and Dad were still trying to play the role of understanding parents, but every little comment, every passive-aggressive remark made it clear that they were angry with me. They'd resorted to throwing subtle jabs, all designed to make me feel guilty for standing my ground. Must be nice to have so much free time after work, Mom said one evening, as if I wasn't already juggling a full-time job and all the pressures that came with it. Dad, never one to be subtle, added, some people don't have the luxury of deciding how they spend their time. I didn't engage. There was no point. Their words were just noise, designed to make me question my choices, but I wasn't about to let them gaslight me into compliance. Amanda, on the other hand, was living in her version of blissful ignorance. She moved back home without hesitation, without an ounce of gratitude. She wasn't even officially moved in yet, but she'd already started taking over the house like it was her own. Her stuff was everywhere, bags scattered across the living room, shoes left by the door, and shopping bags taking up space in every corner. I watched as she laid claim to the house, acting as though she had every right to invade my space. One evening, I came home to find her sprawled across the couch, a bowl of ice cream in hand, watching reality TV. She didn't even acknowledge me when I walked in. I stood there for a moment, staring at her, waiting for some kind of recognition, some small acknowledgement that we were both sharing the same space. But no, she barely glanced up, gave me a half-hearted, hey, and went right back to her show. I wasn't mad at the TV or the ice cream, but the sheer entitlement radiating off her. It wasn't even the fact that she was living here. It was the way she did it without any regard for anyone else. And it was the little things that stung the most. When I went into the kitchen, I noticed that half of my groceries were gone. The bread I bought was missing. My yogurt was gone. Even my leftovers from the night before were nowhere to be found. I had a moment of disbelief, then walked back into the living room to confront her. Did you eat my food? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Amanda didn't even look up from her bowl. Mom said I could, she muttered between bites, like that was a good enough explanation. No, I shot back, feeling a surge of anger that I hadn't been able to express before. She's not the one who paid for it. Finally, Amanda turned her head, her eyes rolling as she set her bowl down on the coffee table. "Chill out, Abby. It's just food. It's my food." She said it like it was no big deal, like my boundaries didn't matter. I felt my fists clench under the table, but I refused to snap. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. "If you want groceries, go buy your own," I said, my voice rising just a little. "Geez, you don't have to be such a drama queen," Amanda retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She grabbed her phone and started texting someone. Completely ignoring me, I stood there, boiling with frustration. This wasn't just about the food, it was about the disrespect, the entitlement, and the utter disregard for the life I was trying to build for myself. The next morning, my mom cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. Her face was serious, her tone sharp. "You need to apologize to your sister," she said, crossing her arms. For what I asked, genuinely confused. For making her feel unwelcome. Mom said, her voice tinged with accusation. "She's going through so much right now, and the last thing she needs is you being difficult." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I asked, disbelief creeping into my voice. "She ate all my food and acted like it wasn't a big deal. How is that my fault?" Mom sighed heavily, like I was the unreasonable one. "It's just food. Abby, you can always buy more." But that wasn't the point. I wasn't arguing about food. I was arguing about boundaries. The point is that she doesn't respect anyone's boundaries, and you're letting her get away with it. Mom scoffed, "This is her home too. You need to learn how to share." That was the moment I realized I wasn't going to win this. My mom wasn't interested in hearing my side of things. She just wanted me to fall in line, to do what was best for the family. I knew that, but I also knew that if I kept sacrificing my own needs, my own space, to appease them, I would be stuck in this toxic cycle forever. Over the next week, things got worse. My parents started dropping hints that they were going to raise my rent if I didn't step up. Amanda, meanwhile, was moving more of her stuff into the house, making it feel more and more like I wasn't even part of it anymore. She began using my bathroom because, apparently, the one downstairs wasn't good enough for her. It felt like I was being pushed out, like I didn't even belong in my own home. One evening, Dad cornered me in the living room, holding a spreadsheet that made my blood run cold. He looked at me, his face hardening, and said, "We need to talk." My heart sank. I already knew where this was going. "We've been looking at the numbers," Dad said, tapping the paper with his pen. "With Amanda moving in, expenses are going up. We think it's only fair for you to contribute more." "More," I repeated, the anger rising in my chest. "I'm already paying rent. I buy my own groceries. I help with chores. What more do you want?" Dad shrugged like it was no big deal. "Well, if you're not willing to help with the baby, this seems like the best solution." I was floored. They were using my rent as leverage to force me into babysitting. They were literally trying to manipulate me into becoming Amanda's unpaid nanny. "This is ridiculous," I said, standing up and turning away. "I'm already doing more than enough. If you want me to leave, just say it." Dad's face turned red. "We're not asking you to leave. Abby, we're just asking you to do your part." "Your part," I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. "You mean Amanda's part? You're asking me to be her backup parent, and I'm not doing it. I'm not your free labor." The silence that followed felt heavy, like the weight of everything I had been bottling up for weeks was finally crashing down on me. Amanda didn't even seem to notice. She just sat there, smirking, acting like she was entitled to everything. "Fine," Dad said, his voice tight. "If you're not going to contribute, maybe we need to rethink your living arrangement." That was the final straw. They had crossed the line. They had tried to manipulate me, guilt me, and now they were using my living situation as a way to control me. I had had enough. I turned on my heel and stormed upstairs, slamming the door behind me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything was spinning. My parents had tried to trap me in a role I never agreed to, and I wasn't going to let them do it any longer. In that moment, I made a decision. I had to leave. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew it was the only way to preserve any shred of autonomy, to stop them from taking everything from me. I had no idea how I was going to pull it off, but I was done. I couldn't keep living in that house, stuck in the middle of their chaos. The plan to leave was set in motion, but it wouldn't be as simple as packing up and walking away. My parents weren't going to let me go that easily. They had control over me for far too long. Now, it was my turn to take control back. But even as I made the decision to leave, I couldn't shake the anxiety gnawing at me. I was already getting ready to leave, but I had to do it carefully, methodically. If they caught wind of my plan too soon, I knew they'd try to sabotage it. So, I started preparing in silence. I started looking for a new place, keeping it all to myself. And when I finally did tell them, they would have no idea what hit them. The next few days felt like a pressure cooker. I could feel the weight of my decision, the burden of everything that was about to change, pressing down on me. I had to move out. I couldn't stay in this toxic environment a second longer. But making that decision and actually going through with it were two completely different things. The house was getting more unbearable by the day. Amanda's presence was suffocating. It wasn't even about her moving in. It was about the way she did it without a single thought for anyone else. She was the queen of the household, and I was just another piece of furniture shoved to the side. Every day felt like a reminder that I didn't belong here. The passive-aggressive comments were becoming more frequent. Every time I walked through the door, my parents would make little jabs, pretending to be casual, but I could feel the resentment simmering just below the surface. Must be nice to not have to worry about things. Abby, Mom would say, her voice too sweet, you don't have kids to take care of. You get to go home and relax after work. And Dad, he was no better. He'd grunt. Some people just don't realize how hard it is when you have to help everyone else. It was like they were trying to make me feel guilty for having a life, for having a job that I actually loved, while they played savior to Amanda's endless disasters. But it wasn't about guilt anymore. I was done being the martyr. I wasn't going to be the one who always picked up the pieces for Amanda's messes. I wasn't going to let them trap me into being the unpaid nanny for her baby, the silent caretaker in a house that never felt like home. I started packing little by little, carefully sorting through my things, making sure I only took what I could carry, leaving the rest behind. I didn't want to give Amanda any excuse to claim things as hers when I left. I knew how she operated. She would try to lay claim to everything I had, and I wouldn't let her get away with it. The hardest part was not telling anyone. I knew my parents would try to talk me out of it. They would guilt trip me. And Amanda. She would try to manipulate me into staying. Probably guilt me into helping with the baby. I wasn't having it. So I kept my plans to myself. I worked my shifts at school, came home, packed a little more, and then went back to work the next day. But the constant tension was eating away at me. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. And finally, it did. One afternoon, I texted Ellie, my coworker who'd offered me a place to stay, and asked if the room was still available. I knew I had to act fast. If I waited too long, I'd be talked out of it. She responded almost immediately. Yup, still available. We can talk more when you get back from work. That was it. I had a plan. Ellie had been kind enough to offer me a safe space, a way out of this madness. I couldn't wait any longer. I texted her back. Let's do it. I'll take the room. It was time. The next couple of days were a blur of organizing, packing, and keeping my head down to avoid any attention. Every time I looked at my parents, I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly pushed it aside. They didn't deserve my loyalty. I had been nothing but a safety net for them, a fallback option whenever their golden child faltered. They never respected my boundaries, never saw me as an individual. They only saw me as a tool to fix Amanda's problems. But I wasn't going to be their tool anymore. On the morning I was set to leave, I made sure everything was ready. I was quiet, careful. I didn't want anyone to notice. I planned it perfectly early enough that Amanda would still be asleep and my parents would be distracted by their routines. It had to be quick. I didn't want a scene. Ellie arrived right on time. Her car pulled up, and I breathed a sigh of relief. This was happening. I grabbed my packed bags, loaded them into the trunk, and started hauling boxes to her car. My heart was racing, but I didn't let myself think too much. I had a plan, and nothing was going to stop me. Just as I was finishing the last load, I heard the sound of Dad's slippers shuffling down the hallway. I knew what was coming. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice low but angry. I didn't stop moving. "I'm leaving." "Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. "I'm done." "You can't just sneak out like this." His voice was rising, but I didn't care anymore. "We're a family." "Abby, are you abandoning your family?" I felt a cold wave of anger wash over me. I wasn't abandoning them. I was saving myself from drowning in their expectations, their manipulation. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said, turning to face him. I'm choosing to live my life on my own terms. His face twisted in disbelief, as if he couldn't understand what was happening. You can't just leave. What about Amanda? What about the baby? I felt my fists clench at my sides. Amanda and the baby aren't my responsibility, I said, my voice rising now. I've helped enough. I'm not staying here just to be your free labor, to be Amanda's unpaid nanny. That's enough, Dad snapped. But before he could say anything more, Mom appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, tears already streaming down her face. You're really doing this? She asked, her voice shaking. Yes, I said, standing my ground. I'm leaving, and I'm not changing my mind. She sobbed, her words coming in ragged breaths. How could you do this to us? To your sister? She's struggling. We're doing everything for her, and you're just walking away. I'm not walking away. Mom, I'm walking towards my own life. I've been stuck in this cycle long enough, and I'm done. You need to realize that. It was like a switch flipped. Amanda appeared at the top of the stairs, looking freshly awake, holding a cup of coffee, as though this was all some sort of drama she was just witnessing. She didn't even seem concerned about what was happening. Instead, she smirked and said, If Abby wants to be selfish, let her. We don't need her anyway. I bit back the urge to scream, the audacity, the sheer entitlement of it all, but I didn't let her see how much it was affecting me. I couldn't. Turning to Ellie, who had just pulled up and was now standing by her car, I said, Let's get this done. And with that, I walked out, leaving my parents behind, their cries echoing in my head. Ellie helped me load the rest of my things into her car, and I didn't look back. The feeling of leaving, of stepping away from that house for good, was a strange mix of relief and liberation. I was free. We drove to Ellie's apartment, where everything felt quieter, calmer. It wasn't anything fancy, but it didn't have to be. It was mine. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like I had a space to breathe. But of course, my family wasn't done with me yet. Within a couple of hours, my phone started buzzing non-stop. Texts, voicemails, angry calls, Mom, Dad, Amanda, everyone. They were furious. They called me ungrateful, selfish. How could I do this to my family? Didn't I care about the baby? Didn't I want to meet my niece? I didn't respond. I couldn't. I blocked them all. This was my decision, and I wasn't going back. The next week, things escalated even further. My mom showed up at my school in the middle of my lunch break, crying and begging me to come back. She said I had destroyed the family. Amanda was falling apart without me. The guilt trips were thick, but this time, I didn't feel the slightest twinge of guilt. My principal had to step in and ask her to leave. It was mortifying, but as the day wore on, I realized something. I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I wasn't the one caving into their demands. I had power, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. I thought I had gotten away clean, but as always, my family had one more card to play. It was a few weeks later, in the dead of night, that the final blow came. I had settled into my new life with Ellie, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace, the quiet of the apartment, the independence, the absence of my parents' suffocating expectations. It was everything I'd wanted. But my peace was short-lived. I hadn't heard from my family in days, and I thought I could finally breathe. Until that night, when my phone buzzed incessantly on the coffee table. A message from Mom. I didn't want to read it. I didn't want to feel that toxic guilt creeping in, but curiosity won, and I unlocked my phone. The text read, Abby, please, we need to talk. Amanda is in a really bad place right now. She needs you. Your family needs you. I don't know what's gotten into you. Don't let this tear us apart. I stared at the screen, feeling my anger bubble up again. My family's definition of need was so warped. They didn't need me. They needed someone to fix their problems, to take on their burdens, to fill in the gaps where Amanda failed, and they were still using guilt and manipulation to pull me back into that mess. I put my phone down and took a long, deep breath. I wasn't going to let this backslide happen. I wasn't going to fall into their trap again. They had pushed me to the edge, expecting me to be their caretaker, their emotional support, their unpaid nanny, And now, they were trying to do it again, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I let a day pass, one day to see if my thoughts and emotions would settle, to see if my anger would subside, but it didn't. It only grew. The next morning, the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was Dad. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But then it rang again, and again, and again. Every call was from a different family member, mostly my parents. My aunt had even called, asking why I was being so selfish and heartless. Each call made my blood boil. They didn't understand. They didn't want to understand. They just wanted control. I blocked each number as they came in, but they just kept coming. And then, just when I thought I was free of the drama, the final message came through. It was a picture, Amanda's baby. The text underneath it read, "You don't even care about your niece. This is your fault. Abby, we'll never forgive you." I stared at the screen, fury and disbelief warring within me. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The manipulation was right there in plain view. I felt my hands shake as I typed a response, but not the response they were hoping for. "This is exactly why I left. You've never respected my boundaries, and you never will. I'm done. I'm not your nanny. I'm not going to keep sacrificing my life for your mistakes. You made this mess, not me." I hit send, and then I deleted the number. I turned to Ellie, who had been quietly sitting on the couch beside me, watching me in silence. She didn't need to ask what was going on. She could see it in my face, the anger, the frustration, the relief. "That's it, right?" she asked gently. "No more going back." I nodded. "No more." The weeks following that message felt like a blur of relief mixed with constant reminders that my family wasn't done with me yet. I thought that once I left, once I stood up for myself, they'd understand, but they didn't. They kept calling, sending texts, and making up excuses for Amanda's behavior. They kept trying to pull me back in, but I didn't budge. I couldn't. A few days later, I had an idea. I needed a final, definitive break. I couldn't keep letting them invade my space, my life, my future. I wasn't going to let them dictate my happiness any longer. I made a call to my lawyer. I explained the situation, the endless guilt trips, the manipulation, the fact that they had been trying to use me to take care of Amanda and her child. I told her everything. Every phone call, every message, every attempt they'd made to drag me back in. And then I told her what I wanted to do. "I need a way to make them understand that I'm not coming back." I said, my voice steady but firm. "I need to cut them off for good." My lawyer listened quietly, and then she said, "We can do that, but we need to make it official. There's a way to sever ties without them having any legal claim to your life or any more of your energy." She laid out the plan. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at them for all the years of manipulation. It was about taking control of my life. For good. I had to make sure that my boundaries were respected. And that meant cutting them off completely. No more calls. No more texts. No more guilt. The legal paperwork would make sure that they couldn't come after me later. Couldn't claim that I owed them anything because of all the help they'd given me. My lawyer was confident that with the right documents, I could make it clear that I was done. But as soon as the papers were filed, the silence descended. At first, I felt the weight of their absence like an open wound. I felt guilty, like I was supposed to be the bigger person, the better daughter. But then, as the days passed, I began to feel something else. Peace. I was finally free. The relief was slow to come, but once it did, it was overwhelming. My life was mine again. Amanda's life, my parents' life, they weren't my responsibility. And now for the first time I could breathe. I wasn't carrying their burdens anymore. The weeks turned into months, and things settled into a new routine. My coworkers were supportive. Ellie had become a true friend. I was finally enjoying the peace I'd fought so hard for. But that didn't mean things were perfect. A few months later, I bumped into an old family friend, someone I'd known since I was a kid. She was standing outside a cafe, and when she saw me, she waved. "Hey, Abby," she said with a warm smile. "How are you? I've been meaning to catch up with you." I smiled back, but there was something guarded in my voice. "I'm doing okay, just settling in. How about you?" She paused, her smile faltering. "Actually, I've been worried about you. Your mom's been saying you cut ties with the family. She says you're being unreasonable, that Amanda really needs you right now." My stomach churned, but I forced a smile. I had to do what was best for me. I'm not responsible for Amanda's choices. and I can't keep enabling them." She nodded slowly, as if she understood, but there was an underlying sense of judgment in her eyes. "I get it, but sometimes family needs to stick together. You can't just walk away." I nodded, but in my head, I was already walking away. "I know," I said, "but I've learned that sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself." It felt good to say that, to claim my truth, even in the face of someone who still didn't quite understand. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about escaping my family's toxicity. This was about reclaiming my life, my power, my future. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but the freedom I felt now was worth every ounce of pain it took to get here. And I was never looking back. Arc 8 seconds. Explosive hook. Narrator, Abby. You won't believe what happened when my parents tried to trap me into becoming my sister's unpaid nanny, and I finally snapped. 8 to 30 seconds. Rapid story tease. Narrator, Abby. I'm Abby, a 25-year-old teacher. I've been living at home to save money, renting my room, buying my own groceries. But then my sister Amanda, the golden child, showed up. Pregnant, she was 32, irresponsible, and completely relying on our parents for everything. So, when they started renovating the basement for her and her baby, I should have known it wasn't just for her comfort. Soon, my parents hit me with a bombshell. I was going to be the one to help her with the baby. For free. They expected me to drop everything to babysit. After a full day of teaching, and when I said no, they threatened to raise my rent. I was stuck. 30-45 seconds. Tease epic revenge. Narrator, Abby. Here's the thing, I wasn't going to let them use me as a free nanny. I had a plan, a genius move, that would destroy their illusion of control once and for all, but you won't believe how I executed it. 45 to 60 seconds. Strong CTA bridge to long form. Narrator, Abby. But that's just the beginning. The full revenge was so genius, I had to break it down. You don't want to miss the satisfaction. The way I fought back will leave you speechless. Narrator, Abby. Full story in my latest video. Link in bio. How do you think it ended? Stay tuned for the shocking twist that changed everything. Story 2. I never thought it would come to this. I always believed family was sacred, but when I started noticing the signs, the cold whispers in the halls of our family business, I realized something was off. My name is Alex Turner, and I run one of the most innovative software development companies in the country. At 30, I had built visionary tech from the ground up with a lot of late nights, a mountain of coffee cups, and the unwavering belief that it was mine, my creation, my future, and my legacy. I had just gotten back from a business trip to San Francisco, where we secured a partnership with a global tech firm. It was a huge deal for visionary tech. We were expanding, reaching new markets, and looking at our first international project. I was on top of the world, but as I walked through the front door of our family home, the weight of something more ominous seemed to follow me inside. That's when it all started to feel strange. My parents, Linda and Frank Turner, were at the kitchen table as I walked in. Mom, with her ever-present smile, waved me over, and Dad gave me his signature. Controlled nod, but there was something unsettling about their tone, the way their eyes flickered to each other just before I walked in. It was subtle, but it was there. "You're really doing great, Alex," Dad said, leaning back in his chair, his arms crossed. He looked proud, but it wasn't a fatherly pride. It felt more like a business transaction. "We're so proud of what you've built with visionary tech. Just a few more steps and we'll all be set." I smiled back, trying to hide the creeping sense of unease. "Thanks, Dad. You've always been there for me." It was the same old charade, but something changed that night. For months, I'd been growing increasingly uncomfortable with their visits to the office, their casual comments on my spending, and their unasked-for advice on every decision I made. Little things here and there, like when Mom suggested I should sell off some company shares to boost my cash flow, or when Dad brought up how much they had invested in the company. But I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Yet, that night, as I sat down at the dinner table, everything seemed to click into place. Their carefully crafted smiles hid a darker intent, one I was starting to recognize. We were having pasta, Dad's usual go-to for a family meeting dinner, and as we ate, They started talking about the company in a way that sent a chill down my spine. "Alex, we've been thinking," Mom said with that smile again. "Maybe it's time for you to take a step back. Let us help you with the management. You've been doing great, but we could handle the day-to-day operations." At first, I thought it was a joke, a casual comment, maybe an offhand suggestion, but as I looked at them, I noticed the determination in their eyes. They weren't asking, they were telling me, "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Things are running smoothly, and I have a great team. We just signed the deal with International Software Solutions. It's a big step forward." Dad's lips thinned slightly. "We know you've been busy, son, but we've been in the business longer. We've seen a lot of startups succeed and fail. Let's just make sure you don't stretch yourself too thin." I could feel my heart race as the unease settled deeper in my gut. The implications of their words were clear. They were subtly trying to take over the company, to take control of what was mine. I excused myself from dinner and retreated to my office, the familiar hum of my computers offering little comfort. I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop, as if the code could offer me answers. But all I could think about was the unease that had settled in my bones. Why did they suddenly want so much control? Why now, when the company was finally thriving? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking back to when I first started Visionary Tech. I had poured my heart and soul into this company, the long nights, the constant sacrifices, the endless coding, and while I had always kept things professional with my parents, their sudden involvement in every decision made me wonder if their interest in the company had always been more about control than love. I decided to dig deeper, just to be sure. The next few weeks were a blur. I kept my eyes open for signs of their influence creeping further into my life. Every meeting felt like they were trying to assert more control. At board meetings, they would suddenly pipe up with unsolicited advice, as though they were experts in the field. My mother would casually suggest hiring more family friends for certain roles, and my father would frequently bring up the financial health of the company, making it sound like they were the ones who had made all the tough calls. But the most telling sign came when I discovered a series of conversations between my father and one of the company's investors. I stumbled upon an email thread that looked like a simple financial update, but buried in the details was something I never expected to see. My parents were quietly working behind my back, orchestrating a company restructuring and positioning themselves as co-CEOs. They were setting the stage to take over, using my trust against me. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about wanting a bigger role. This was a calculated power play, a hostile takeover disguised as family advice. I knew I had to act fast. They were plotting to control the company I had fought so hard to build, and if I didn't move quickly, I could lose everything. The question was how. I had always trusted them, but that trust had been shattered. My gut instinct told me that I had to outmaneuver them, to protect what was mine before they took control. It was a harsh realization, but I had to play the game they had started, and I had to play it better. As I thought about how to protect Visionary Tech, I started considering my options. One thing was clear: I had to cut them out, but I had to do it in a way that wouldn't just anger them, but would take away their leverage completely. The moment I made up my mind, I contacted my lawyer. The morning after I found those emails, I felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. It was as though I had opened my eyes to a whole new world, one where my parents, whom I had always trusted, were nothing more than manipulators seeking to control my life, my work, and my company. My chest tightened with every thought of what they were trying to do. They had spent years positioning themselves in the background, their power hidden behind smiles and encouraging words, but now they had crossed a line. I wasn't going to let them destroy everything I'd worked for. Visionary Tech wasn't just a company, it was my company. I had built it with nothing but my own grit and determination. And now, with the growing suspicion that my parents were planning to take it from me, I knew it was time to act. I immediately called Sarah Jenkins, the lawyer I had hired years ago for some preliminary contracts, and explained the situation in one sitting. Sarah was sharp, one of those rare professionals who mixed brilliance with empathy. She didn't waste any time. "Alex," she said, "after I finished laying out the situation, we need to make this a strategic move, and fast. They've likely been planning this for a while, but they made a critical mistake by underestimating you." Her words were a small relief, a glimmer of hope that I wasn't completely alone in this battle. She reassured me that I had options, But it wouldn't be easy. This was about more than just protecting a business, it was about protecting my future. She laid out the plan in front of me on a whiteboard in her office. As she spoke, I felt the weight of every decision settle onto my shoulders. This wasn't going to be a simple battle, this was going to be a war. First, Sarah started. We need to make sure you have legal backing for every move you make. The restructuring your parents are pushing for. It's not just a bad idea, it's an illegal overreach of power, and you can use that to your advantage. She explained the bylaws of the company, pointing out a safeguard clause I had completely forgotten about. Section 7 subsection B would allow me to initiate a buyout of any non-founding shares in the event of a hostile takeover attempt. My fingers ran over the edge of the papers she had handed me. The clause was simple, yet it was the perfect defense I needed. A little safeguard I had trusted in without fully understanding its importance. Now, it was my lifeline. Once we have that in place, we need to transfer a majority of your shares to someone you trust completely. Someone with the knowledge and loyalty to stand by you in the inevitable backlash. I knew exactly who that person was, David. He had been with me since day one, when the company was still just an idea scrawled on a napkin. David wasn't just an employee, he was a partner, a confidant. He believed in visionary tech with the same passion I did, and he truly understood it in a way that no one else could. He was the first person I turned to. David, I need you, I said. Calling him later that evening, the urgency in my voice was unmistakable. What's going on, man? David asked. Always calm, always direct. I think my parents are trying to take the company from me. They've been slowly setting things up, and I can't ignore it anymore. I need you to help me move the shares. We're going to need to act fast. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It was as though he was processing the information, but then his voice came back, steady as always. I'm in. You don't even need to ask. What do we need to do? I had always trusted David, but this was something deeper than a business partnership. This was about saving everything I had worked for and about making sure my parents didn't get their hands on something that wasn't theirs. Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly with Sarah to prepare for the legal maneuver. We were pulling every string, ensuring that the transfer of my shares was documented meticulously, ensuring that my parents couldn't claim they were blindsided. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my world was about to shift in a way I couldn't undo. David and I spent hours drafting the paperwork and securing our legal position. Every step felt like a gamble, but Sarah was confident that with the clause in place, the shares transfer, and the mounting evidence of their attempts to control the company, we would have a solid case. But the biggest hurdle was still ahead: the family meeting. My parents had summoned me to discuss the future growth of visionary tech, their words laced with an undertone I couldn't ignore. They were ready to roll out their restructuring plan, and they were sure they would have my consent. They had no idea what I was about to do. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I had anticipated. I could feel the tension building in the air as I got dressed, the cold suit jacket pressing against my back. My thoughts raced, but I stayed calm on the surface. This wasn't just a negotiation. It was my moment to take control back. When I arrived at my parents' house, the atmosphere was thick with something more than just family dinner chatter. The smell of expensive perfume and freshly cut flowers from Martha's latest obsession made the air feel suffocating. Emily was already there, sitting on the edge of a velvet chair, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Alex, it's so good to see you. My mother's voice dripped with her usual sweet facade, but I could see the underlying edge. We're really looking forward to this discussion. We've been thinking about what's best for the company. You've done an excellent job, but it's time for some new direction. I nodded, pretending to be completely ignorant of their plans. They couldn't know I was already steps ahead. Mom, Dad, I've been thinking too, I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the storm inside me. But there's one thing that you've overlooked. You're right, we need direction, but I need to have control to keep things running smoothly. And the restructuring plan you've proposed doesn't give me that. In fact, it takes it away. There was a flicker of confusion in both their eyes. Then, I pulled out the documents, the share transfer papers, the clause from the bylaws, and a copy of the emails I had uncovered. I slid the papers slowly across the table. You see, the thing is, I've already made moves to protect the company. I've transferred my majority shares to a trusted third party. And as for the restructuring, well, it requires a majority vote. You no longer have it. The silence that followed was deafening. The silence in the room was deafening. It wasn't just the stillness that followed my words, it was the weight of the truth that hung heavily in the air. My parents sat across from me, their faces drained of color. Richard's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he stared at the papers in front of him. Martha, always the poised one, had lost her composure, her mouth working as if she was trying to form words but couldn't. I remained calm, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. You see, I continued, the thing about family businesses is that they're supposed to be built on trust, but for years, all I've gotten from you both is manipulation and control. You pushed me to put visionary tech under the family name. You made it sound like it was for the family's future. But all along, you've been scheming to take it from me. Richard slammed his fist onto the table, sending the teacups rattling. You think this is some game, Alex? You think you can just throw away everything we've built for you? His voice was a low growl, raw with emotion. You're ungrateful. You know that, Martha added, her voice high-pitched and breaking. We gave you everything. This is how you repay us, by turning your back on your family. The familiar sting of their words barely affected me anymore. For years, I had worked for their approval, bending over backwards to make them proud, to build something that was ours, only to discover that the moment I succeeded, they wanted to take it from me. They wanted to control my success, my hard work. But now the power was in my hands. I leaned forward, my eyes locking with theirs. This isn't about you. This is about me. I've worked for this. I've sacrificed for this. And you know what I'm done with trying to prove myself to you? Visionary tech is mine, not yours. You're not going to take it from me. Martha's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. We'll see about that. Just remember, Alex, you're still part of this family. No matter what you think, you can't erase us. It was a subtle threat, but one I had heard many times before. And for the first time, it didn't scare me. It only strengthened my resolve. The meeting ended without resolution. My parents stormed out of the room, fuming with anger, but I knew it was only the beginning. They wouldn't accept defeat that easily, but I had made my move. And in the days that followed, things quickly escalated. I thought I had prepared myself for the inevitable backlash. What I hadn't anticipated, however, was the level of desperation my parents would reach. The first move they made was to attempt to use their connections to bully me into submission. Richard made a series of calls to people in our circle, trying to convince them that I was making a rash decision, that I was jeopardizing everything my family had worked for. But his words fell on deaf ears. The network that had supported them in the past now looked at me with a mix of pity and disbelief. My parents, once the image of control and influence, were now scrambling, clutching at the remnants of their reputation. Then came the legal threats. My father had always believed that money and power could solve everything, so he hired a team of aggressive lawyers to intimidate me. I was bombarded with letters, phone calls, and legal papers threatening everything from fraud to breach of contract. But Sarah was ready for them. She didn't flinch. Every claim they made was swiftly countered with the evidence I had painstakingly gathered. The emails, the recordings, Emily's testimony, all of it painted a clear picture my parents had attempted a hostile takeover, and the law was on my side. The real turning point came when the media got involved. As I had feared, the story of the family dispute leaked to the press. What started as a private legal battle soon turned into a public spectacle. The media feasted on the drama, spinning it into a narrative that painted me as the betrayed son and my parents as the manipulative, controlling parents. At first, I was horrified. The last thing I wanted was to air my family's dirty laundry in front of the world, but as the story spread, I realized something my parents' carefully crafted image of perfect, loving parents was shattering. People started questioning their motives, and the more they did, the more I could see the cracks in their facade. During this time, I had a lot of time to reflect. In some ways, the legal battle, the media frenzy, and the constant back and forth with my parents took a toll on me. But in others, it was freeing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing for anyone. I wasn't trying to fit into a role they had carved out for me. I was fighting for something I had built with my own hands. I began to realize that this wasn't just about a company or about family. This was about taking control of my own life. It was about not letting anyone define me, not even the people who had raised me. And as I watched my parents struggle, the public perception of them shifted. At first, some of their friends and business associates sided with them. offering words of comfort and sympathy. But as the days went by and the truth continued to surface, even their closest allies started to pull away. The mask of the doting parents was slipping. People were beginning to see them for who they really were. But the hardest part wasn't just the legal battle or the media pressure, it was the emotional toll this all took on me. For years, I had believed in the idea of family. I had believed that blood was thicker than water. But the more I fought for visionary tech, the more I realized that my parents weren't fighting for me. They were fighting for their own power, their own control. And that realization hit hardest when Emily finally came to me. She showed up at my office one afternoon, looking smaller, quieter, and less confident than I had ever seen her. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, but now, as she sat across from me, there was no pretense. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I looked at her, my sister, the person I had always loved, but who had always seemed so distant. For what? For everything, she said, her voice breaking, for not seeing it sooner, for not standing up for you. I didn't realize how bad things were. You were always trying to prove yourself, but I never saw it. I was just so caught up in being the favorite, in being their puppet. I didn't realize I was letting them treat you like this. Her words, soft and full of regret, hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent so many years resenting her, feeling like I was the one always left in the shadows. But now I understood. She had been playing her role in the same twisted game, just in a different way. I'm sorry, Alex, she continued, for not seeing you, for not being there when you needed me the most. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the years of resentment, but another part of me, the part that had fought so hard for everything I had, couldn't ignore the raw sincerity in her voice. She was acknowledging the truth, something I had never expected her to do. We need to get through this together, I said, my voice firm but compassionate. But I can't forgive them until they realize what they've done. Not just to me, but to everyone. That was the turning point. Emily wasn't the enemy anymore. She had recognized the manipulation and the control for what it was. And together, we made sure to hold our parents accountable for their actions. But the war wasn't over. The legal battle was still ongoing, and my parents weren't going to back down without a fight. They had spent years building their empire of control, and they weren't about to let their golden son walk away without consequences. As for me, I had nothing left to lose. The fight had become personal, and I was determined to win, no matter what it took. Story 3. Growing up in the Bennett family, I learned early on that my role was clear. I was the responsible one, the one who quietly kept everything together. My younger brother, Tyler, was the shining star. Everything he did seemed to come effortlessly. He was the one Mom and Dad were always proud of, and everyone adored him. I was the one who quietly supported from the sidelines, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. This was a role I never asked for, but somehow it became mine. I was the eldest, and as such, the expectations were always higher for me. While Tyler seemed to have it easy, I was the one who took on the burdens, whether it was covering for him when he messed up or picking up the slack when things at home got chaotic. I never complained. I didn't want to be a burden, but over time, it wore me down. The sacrifices, the silent resentment, the overwhelming need to prove myself, they all started to build up. My name's Daniel Bennett. I'm 29 and I'm a logistics manager for a mid-sized company. It's not glamorous, but it's stable, and I've worked hard for it. But that's not the story I'm here to tell. This isn't about my job. It's about my family, the ones I thought I could rely on, the ones who, despite all the sacrifices I made for them, never showed up when it mattered most. The weight of these years of sacrifices first started to sink in when Tyler needed help paying for his second car. The first one had been wrecked in an accident he barely acknowledged, but it was fine because Mom and Dad got him a new one. Then the second car needed repairs, and I was the one they turned to for the down payment. My savings, hard-earned from years of overtime and scrimping, had become the cushion for Tyler's mistakes. At the time, I told myself it was fine. After all, I was the responsible one, the reliable one. They needed me, and it was my duty to help. That's what family does, right? But as the years passed, the weight of those sacrifices, all the loans I gave, the times I paid for things I didn't have the means to, started to feel more like a curse than a choice. And Tyler, he never even noticed. My parents, they barely acknowledged my contributions. Instead, they celebrated Tyler's every move. I couldn't escape the feeling of being invisible. And yet, I kept giving, kept sacrificing, kept hoping that someday my efforts would be recognized. But that recognition never came. It was always Tyler, his promotions at work, his shiny new cars, his glowing report cards. I'd built my own career, worked hard to establish myself, but it always felt like nothing was ever enough. Everything was about him. Always. The spotlight was never on me, but I didn't care. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I was fine. I could handle it. Then, Sarah came into my life. Sarah was everything my family wasn't supportive. Understanding and patient. She was an elementary school teacher, and she made me feel seen. Not just for what I could do, not just for my practical, logical mind, but for who I was. With Sarah, there was no need to play a part. There were no expectations or demands. She just accepted me. And for the first time in my life, I realized what it felt like to be truly loved for who I was, not for what I could give. Sarah changed everything for me. She made me believe that it was okay to think about myself, to dream for myself, to stop being the caretaker of everyone else's needs. And when I proposed to her, it felt like the first step toward building a life that was mine and mine alone. But there was one thing I couldn't shake: a nagging, desperate desire to have my family there to witness this moment. It wasn't just an engagement party. It was a chance for them to see me for who I really was, not just the quiet, dependable brother, but the man who was building a future. I wanted them to be there, to show up for me for once. So I did what I thought was necessary. I planned the most extravagant engagement party I could. I booked flights, I reserved hotel rooms, I booked the ballroom at the prestigious Oakwood Country Club. I spared no expense. This was my moment. I wanted them there. I thought they would want to be there. They had to, right? The day before the party, I called my mom to confirm that they were coming. Her response was as nonchalant as it was dismissive. "We'll see. Daniel, I'm not sure yet. You know how busy things are?" she said. The words stung, but I brushed it off. I wasn't going to let their indifference ruin this for me. Tyler was even worse. He didn't respond to my texts or calls until the day of the party, and even then, it was just a vague message. "Yeah, sounds good, bro. We'll see what happens." Despite the reservations, the hotel bookings, the flights, I clung to the hope that they would come, that this time would be different. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. This time I thought they would be there. The day of the party dawned bright and clear. Sarah and I arrived at the Oakwood Country Club early, our hearts full of excitement, ready to celebrate this new chapter in our lives. The ballroom looked magnificent, more than I could have ever imagined. The guests started arriving, friends from Sarah's side of the family, co-workers who I had known for years. Everyone was happy. Everyone was smiling. The warm laughter filled the air, the scent of roses drifting gently from the centerpieces on every table. But something was missing. The seats reserved for my family, front and center, remained empty. I told myself they were just running late. Traffic, last-minute things. But with every passing minute, my anxiety grew. A half hour went by, then another. Still, nothing. I forced myself to smile, to focus on Sarah's relatives, who were kind and warm, but my stomach churned. I excused myself, stepping out into the hallway, trying to quell the rising tide of doubt. I called my dad. The phone rang and rang until he finally picked up. "Dad, it's Daniel. Are you guys on your way?" "The party started almost 2 hours ago," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, sorry, son," he responded, his tone casual, too casual. "We're actually at Tyler's girlfriend's event. You know, the one with Madison. It's a big family thing. Really important." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I stood there in silence for a moment, unable to respond. They were at his event, not mine. My engagement party, a moment I had poured my heart and soul into, wasn't even worth a mention. Tyler had orchestrated a gathering on the same day as mine, and my parents, always so eager to make him feel special, had picked his event over mine. There was no explanation, no apology, just a casual dismissal of what should have been a meaningful moment for me. "Dad, really?" I asked, my voice cracking. You're choosing him over me." The laugh that came through the phone, followed by the clinking of glasses, made my blood run cold. I couldn't take it anymore. I hung up. I just couldn't do it. I stumbled back into the ballroom, my heart hammering in my chest, the room suddenly feeling too large, too suffocating. Sarah's warm smile caught me, but it was no longer the same. Her eyes, full of concern, saw straight through the facade I was desperately trying to maintain. I couldn't even bring myself to smile back at her. I felt like I was suffocating in my own skin. "Mike, what happened?" Sarah asked, her voice soft, but I could hear the worry underneath. I shook my head, the weight of the conversation I just had with my father crashing down on me like a tidal wave. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I was angrier at them, at myself, or at the cruel twist of fate that had brought me to this moment. Here I was, surrounded by people who genuinely cared, yet the people who were supposed to care the most, the ones who'd been my entire life, had chosen to turn their backs on me. "They're not coming," I finally muttered, the words heavy on my tongue, like they didn't even belong to me. "What, Michael? I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say." Sarah's voice was trembling, but she didn't push me to explain. She just held my hand, as if that was all she could offer. But right then, it felt like it was the only thing that mattered. The ballroom was still buzzing with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. But to me, the noise had become a distant hum, like it was happening in another world. Sarah's family, who had barely known me, had stepped in to fill the gap my family had left. They smiled, toasted, and celebrated with us. But my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling of being betrayed, of being utterly unseen by the very people I had spent my entire life trying to please. An hour passed, then two. I kept checking my phone, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would show up with an apology. Maybe they'd realize how wrong they were and come to support me in my moment. But the phone stayed silent. My inbox stayed empty. Finally, Sarah's cousin Emily approached me. "Hey, Michael, is everything okay? We're all wondering. Didn't your family RSVP?" My heart sank. I forced a smile, trying to wave away the questions that were building, the concerned glances from the people around me. "They must have gotten the date wrong or something," I said, my voice sounding too casual, too forced. But deep down, I knew the truth. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a deep, cold knot that told me this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. My family had deliberately chosen to not show up. I had always been the one to make excuses for them, to smooth things over when they messed up. But this was different. This time, there were no excuses. They had crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. And suddenly, I felt like I was seeing them for who they really were. At that moment, I excused myself once again, stepping out into the hallway, hoping for a moment of peace. I was battling emotions I didn't know how to handle: anger, confusion, and most of all, the deep ache of betrayal. I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone when it buzzed. A message popped up, and I froze when I saw it. It was from my mom. "Michael, why are you making such a scene? This is a family event for Tyler. You should be happy for him. I'm sorry we couldn't make it, but we're not the ones making this difficult. You're the one causing drama." My chest tightened, and I fought to keep my composure. The message wasn't just a text. It was a slap in the face. After everything I had done for them, this was how they treated me. With a dismissive, almost angry text, blaming me for their absence, the words echoed in my head, over and over again. "You're the one causing drama." It stung. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room, but I couldn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and composed myself, trying to quell the rage that bubbled up inside me. But I wasn't okay. I was far from okay. I had been living in this family dynamic for years, always pushing aside my own needs and desires to please them. And for what? For nothing. My whole life. I had been invisible to them. All my efforts, my sacrifices meant nothing. As I stood there, the weight of it all pressing down on me, I knew I couldn't keep living this way. Not anymore. I went back into the ballroom. I looked around at the people who cared about me: Sarah, her family, our friends, and I realized something. They were my family now. They were the ones who had shown up, who had supported me in ways my own blood never had. I might not have had my parents here, but I had people who loved me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I walked up to Sarah, who was surrounded by her friends, all of them laughing, toasting, and celebrating. Her face lit up when she saw me. "You okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm better than okay. I'm done being invisible." The night passed in a blur. I danced, laughed, and let myself feel the warmth of the people who truly cared. It wasn't the party I had envisioned, but in a strange way, it was better. I had my true family around me, and that was enough. But as the night wound down and the last of the guests filtered out, I couldn't shake the feeling of what had just happened. The call from my dad, the message from my mom, the way they'd turned their backs on me, it wasn't something I could easily forget. I had always thought that if I did everything right, if I sacrificed enough, my family would finally see me. But I was wrong. I was angry, but there was something else there too. A quiet, simmering realization that I had given so much of myself for so long, and for what? Nothing. Later that night, as I sat in the quiet apartment with Sarah, I checked my phone again. The screen was flooded with missed calls and texts, most of them from my family. The texts ranged from angry to desperate, full of accusations and demands. They were angry because I had posted about the party on social media, pictures of Sarah and her family, my friends, and my true support system. I read through them, each one more venomous than the last. "How could you do this to us? Michael, you've ruined your relationship with the family. You're trying to make us look bad, aren't you?" Each message felt like a slap. My parents were angry not because they had hurt me, but because they had been exposed. I wasn't the one ruining the family. They had been doing that for years. In the past, I would have been guilt-ridden, begging for their forgiveness, but this time, I felt nothing but calm, a strange peace washing over me. I wasn't going to apologize. Not anymore. I had to draw the line. I opened up social media and posted a picture of Sarah and me, her family, my friends, our laughter. This was my true family. The caption read simply, "Grateful for the people who truly show up for me, surrounded by love and happiness." It wasn't a petty post. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone, but it was a statement, a declaration. I was done with their games, done with trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. The moment I hit send, my phone lit up again, but this time I ignored it. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. As I sat there next to Sarah, her hand in mine, the anger from earlier seemed to melt away. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The next few days felt like an emotional roller coaster I wasn't quite prepared for. The fallout from my social media post was swift and brutal, but I wasn't the one suffering. My parents and David were. Their perfect image carefully constructed over the years was crumbling, and they were furious. I had expected the anger. I had expected the guilt trips. But what came next was a different kind of fury, a desperate, public display of their need to maintain control. It wasn't just about a party. It wasn't just about being snubbed on one of the most important days of my life. It was about a much deeper betrayal that I'd spent years tolerating, but was finally seeing for what it truly was. I had always thought of myself as the reliable son, the one who took care of everything, always putting others' needs before my own. It had been a role I'd grown into like a second skin, but this time, when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone different. I saw a man who had been manipulated, controlled, and used by his own family, someone who had been nothing more than a stepping stone for their own ambitions, their own desires, and the realization that I had allowed it for so long it broke something in me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The screen of my phone kept flashing, the constant barrage of calls and messages pulling me back into the chaos I was trying to escape. I picked up the phone to see yet another message from my mom. "Michael, how could you do this? Do you really want to cut us out of your life over something so trivial?" I didn't answer. The words stung, but I wasn't surprised. My mother's message was textbook guilt-laden, emotionally manipulative, and completely oblivious to the pain I had been enduring for years. It was all about them, how this reflected poorly on them, how their perfect image was now tainted, and, of course, how they were the real victims. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand, the weight of everything sinking in. This wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was a life-defining moment. The choice I had made to finally stand up for myself, to put myself first, had set something irreversible in motion. I felt both terrified and empowered by it. Sarah stirred beside me on the couch, her soft breath steady in the quiet apartment. I glanced over at her, She was asleep, completely unaware of the storm that was raging outside our little sanctuary. I didn't want to wake her. She had already been through enough with me. Her patience and kindness had been unwavering. But tonight, I needed her to know how much I appreciated her, how much her love meant to me. I gently ran my fingers through her hair, feeling a sense of calm wash over me for the first time in days. This was what mattered. This was my true family. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of activity. My phone was still buzzing, but this time, I let it ring out. The reality of the situation was setting in. My parents were trying to control the narrative, and they were pulling out all the stops. I had received 2 new messages from my father. "You're an embarrassment, Michael. You're trying to ruin everything. This is a family business and you're throwing it all away. You'll regret this. I'm telling everyone how ungrateful you are. You've lost our support. Don't come crawling back." I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly at the irony of it all. Here they were, accusing me of being ungrateful, of ruining everything, when the reality was that they had been the ones who had ruined everything. Their selfishness, their blind favoritism of David, their constant need to manipulate and control it had all led to this moment. And now, they were playing the victim. They were desperately trying to make me feel guilty for finally asserting my own boundaries. I didn't respond to them, not right away. Instead, I texted Sarah, telling her I needed to talk. When she called me, I could hear the concern in her voice. I needed to tell her what had happened, how bad things had gotten. "Hey, babe," I started, my voice still shaky. "I need to tell you something. It's about my parents. Things are bad." She didn't interrupt me. She just listened as I poured my heart out to her. The betrayal, the years of sacrifice, the endless cycle of being used, dismissed, and made to feel invisible. How they had never truly seen me. How they had never cared to. They just don't get it. I finished, feeling a tear slip down my cheek, but I wasn't embarrassed. They don't see the damage they've done. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay. I'm done with it. Sarah didn't say much at first. There was silence on the other end of the line, but then she spoke. Her voice soft but full of strength. "Michael, you're not alone in this. I'm right here. I'll always be here. And you don't have to carry this weight anymore." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on the fallout with my family, I had almost forgotten that I had someone who truly saw me, someone who loved me unconditionally. The days after the engagement party were a blur of tension and heartbreak. My parents continued their angry barrage of texts and phone calls, but I refused to engage with them. Every time they tried to manipulate me, I only felt more resolute in my decision. The more they tried to pull me back into their toxic orbit, the more I felt myself drifting away. It wasn't just about the engagement party anymore. It was about my entire life. The years of being the good son, the invisible one, the one who did everything right but was never truly acknowledged. I realized that my entire identity had been shaped by their expectations. It had taken this event, this betrayal, for me to finally see that I needed to break free. But the fallout wasn't just personal. Word of the family drama had spread quickly, especially within our tight-knit community. I began to hear whispers at work, at the grocery store, even from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some of them had heard from my parents, and they were all too happy to play the part of the innocent victims. "Michael, I just wanted to say that I'm so sorry for what your parents said about you," one old neighbor had said when I ran into him at the store. "They've been telling everyone that you're the one who's being unreasonable, that you've thrown everything away. It's a shame." I smiled tightly, the bitterness bubbling up again. The entire town was turning into a theater, with my family playing their roles as the hurt, betrayed parents, and me as the ungrateful son, but I refused to get drawn into it. The truth was becoming clear to everyone who cared to look beyond the surface, and that was all I needed. One evening, after yet another tense phone call with my mother, I sat down with Sarah in our living room. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were full of understanding. "I can't keep fighting them," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "They won't ever get it. I've tried to explain myself, but they just twist everything I say. It's like they're trying to rewrite the story." Sarah took my hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "You don't need their approval, Michael. You don't need them to validate you. You've got me. And you've got your true friends. That's what matters." Her words gave me strength, more than I had ever expected. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to choose myself, to stop seeking their approval, to stop allowing their manipulation to define me. The next day, I took the first concrete step in what would become my journey of healing. I made the decision to speak to a lawyer about severing ties with my parents, not just for the engagement party, but for everything. I was done. Done with being used. Done with the emotional toll they had taken on me. Done with being the person they wanted me to be. When I walked into Miriam Gold's office, I was nervous, but as I sat down and began to speak, something shifted inside me. The weight I had carried for so long began to lighten, as if the act of speaking my truth was finally releasing me from the chains that had bound me for years. Miriam listened patiently as I told her everything. She took notes, asked insightful questions, and made me feel like for the first time in my life, my story mattered. She didn't dismiss me. She didn't belittle my feelings. She simply listened and understood. That's when I knew I had made the right choice. "Michael," she said once I had finished, "you have a strong case, but this isn't just about money. It's about your peace of mind, about claiming your life back." And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about legal battles or financial settlements. It was about reclaiming my identity. It was about stepping into my own truth and no longer allowing my family's toxic narrative to control my life. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it. With Sarah by my side, with my true family, my chosen family, I was finally free.